هاي حسين كيفك؟
هاي مايا.
شو looking forward لليوم؟
Yes, very much.
بتعرف ليه نحن عم نحكي كبسكوت وراحة؟
شو؟
ليش نحن بسكوت وراحة؟
ما فهمت شو بدي أعمل فيه.
انت بتحكي هيك بدي بتعتمك you should talk like that. عم بقول لك بتعرف ليه نحن بسكوت وراحة اليوم؟ لأنه اسم البودكاست بسكوت وراحة. يس. اليوم معنا اورينس. عادة بنصور بس أنا والانترفيو تبعي، بس اليوم معنا اورينس. زينة ولينا كيفكن؟
الحمد لله، انتو كيفكن؟
بدنا نعطيهم البسكوت.
شادي زينة ولينا هون شو عم تعمل؟ لينا قولي الحمد لله. احكي. ايه.
wishing you good luck لليوم، وإن شاء الله بتكون interview interesting with valuable information.
Thank you Lina. Alright, let's start. So اليوم حلقتنا مثل ما قلت عن الجندر أو الجندر. معي حسين. عادة أنا لازم أعرف فيه، بس رح خليه هو يعرف عن نفسه. I think it's better. حسين.
Okay, hi. أنا Hussein Cheaito, Cheating alumni as well. I'm a development economist working here in Beirut.
وكيف بلشت معك قصة الجندر؟ لأنه بتشيفنينج مثلا بحس كل حدا عنا عنده اختصاص أو معروف بشي، سو لما نحكي بموضوع الجندرز وهيك أكتر شي كانوا يطلعوا معنا ديما وحسين وريما. ديما كانت be with us، ريما منا بلبنان، سو حسين is here. بس أنا بدي أسأله ليه أنت يعني كيف بلشت معك إنه حسين جندر؟
Yes, sure. Yes, I'm an economist. I do economic research, but throughout my studies and my work as well, I realized that economics and the politics around it is very gendered. So often we separate issues of gender, issues of social identity from economics, and they're often separated for very structural reasons. So a lot of my research is to investigate how gender can be incorporated into how we understand the economy basically.
حلو. أول مرة أصلاً بسمع economy و gender. أنت وين درست على فكرة؟ حسين is also a cheating scholar. بدك تقول لنا شوي عن your cheating experience?
Yes, sure. So I studied in the University of Sussex. I did development economics. And that was in 2019. In my master's, my focus was actually not on gender as much as it was on governance and the economics of governance. But however, it kind of got me to think about how the way societies are governed are rooted in economic issues. And then this kind of got me into this idea that within society, there is a lot of divisions. One of these divisions is this issue of gender. And that's why I started to take this focus in my work.
ايه هو عادة وقت نحكي ايكونومي أكتر شيء بنحكي مثلا social status، بنحكي financial status، socio-economic بنسميها status. قليل الواحد يقول إنه gender، مع إنه كتير صار في قصص women empowerment women، بس كمان أوقات بننسى المن.
Exactly.
So when we talk gender مش إنه قصدنا دغري يلا women.
And I think this is a very important distinction to make. There's a big difference between token-like approaches. So when we say, for example, we need to have X% of women in power or X% of women in a certain profession, this does not indicate empowerment. Often, a lot of these tokenist approaches, they are just numbers. They don't necessarily mean or indicate progression or progressive policies. And this applies here to Lebanon because we often issues of gender and issues of women empowerment intersect with sectarianism, intersect with issues of power and wealth. So often, yes, you would see some presence of women in power in municipalities and in the parliament, but this does not indicate
تقدم or progression.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, these women will push for policies or will agree to policies that would disfavor women in the general population.
Or agendas led by men, which is funny. And
exactly.
They're puppets, basically.
That's why we need to think, I think, of gender beyond just this tokenist approach. We need to think of it in terms of the politics around it, in terms of social formation, in terms of Yes, so not just in terms of identity as identity, but more how it intersects with economic policies, political decisions,
decision making صح
etc.
صح. أنا اليوم كنت عم أعمل الحلقة وكنت عم فكر إنه جندر، ليه كلمة جندر وأنا بعتبر منها إنه عربية أو إلها مشتق بالعربي. قلت بدي أسأل حسين ليش جندر ما في عنا كلمة بالعربي ممكن تساوي كلمة جندر؟
I think it's a very very important question that often إنه عن جد ما بنفكر فيه people that work in the field. So أنا the field particularly I work in is feminist economics or gender economics, and often we say أول شيء it's very like the way this field is conducted is largely dependent, at least at the current stage in Lebanon, is largely dependent on Western discourses, which is a problem because obviously living in Lebanon is a very different circumstances and a very different context than when this concept was conceived in the West. So we don't have this here for that reason in particular, the Western influence and the ideas. But I think also there is a localized problem as well. I think because often issues of gender are intersected with the issues of sex, meaning that we follow like the general discourse and the mainstream discourse is that we look at gender from a purely biological point of view. So which is what we call in the field biological determinism, or meaning that if basically it gives a reason to differentiate or divide society basically on the biological characteristics of these individuals. What this means is that often because these two, the issues of gender and sex, are conflated, we end up in a situation where women are for example, oppressed or marginalized in certain economic sectors or in certain political landscapes or arenas, because again, there is this bodily biological characteristics that are guiding decisions at the level of like the policy. So I think this is one of the main reasons why often we don't really talk about gender, because to us it's a biological issue. So there is no nuance
beyond the biological.
Exactly, like there is no nuanced definition or characterization of gender. But I think there is a lot of feminist groups that are intersectional in a way, that want to decolonize a lot of these approaches, who are trying to push for something that is very particular to the region. But I think there's a lot of work still to get to that point. But yeah.
So هي كلمة gender ما في غيرها.
This is like this is how typically how we define it.
طيب, how would you define it? That's the thing. The second point. للي okay بيسمع genderification أو gender أو ما بيعرف شو يعني gender.
No, yeah, for sure. I understand, because often, like as I said, the way gender is characterized, or the narratives around gender, are guided by our systemic narratives. So our narratives that are propagated by people in power, and this includes, I'm not ما بس عم بقول على people in parliament. I'm talking about the whole institution that is Lebanon. So historically, we could see like there is a general focus on, for example, the family unit as a main unit of interest in the economy, in the politics. So you have the man, you have the woman, and then, but there is not much conversation on gender as a more of a continuous historical, political, social process.
اوكي رح اقول لك شغله. مثلا كنت عم بحكي عن جندر هيك عن الموضوع، حدا قال لي هول تبع الجيز.
Yes, no, it is a common response.
But is it correct?
Of course it's not. No. Sexual orientation is something, and gender identity is something else. So, and often, as I was saying earlier, there is this flawed approach and the way gender is characterized within Lebanese society, but also around the world, really. Like I wouldn't.
So بدي اشرح gender in lay terms إنه حدا.
Yes, so it's basically it's about identity. It's an identity that is shaped by political processes, by historical processes, by cultural processes. So it's not really about the biology. It's really about it's more about the identity. It's a politics of identity, etc. And that's why a lot of, for example, people who don't identify with a certain sex are more comfortable around gender politics or spaces that allow for a conversation on gender politics, because it's not really restricted to the sexual characteristics or the biological
Beyond that.
characteristics. So I guess in layman terms, it's really just saying that gender is more, it goes beyond biological factors. It's
Example,
about,
if you're
yes,
born
it's
a
about,
woman, doesn't mean your gender is
exactly,
female.
and that's the biological characteristic of who you are, and that's obviously valid. But also, I think Madaruri is a hada that is born with certain organs or with certain biological characteristics. They would identify as such. That's why we have categories like non-binary individuals who don't necessarily fit into one of the biological binary characteristics.
إيه لأنه أنا أخذت workshop عن هدول حتى there were so many يعني ما بعرفهم كلهم. و at one point صرنا نحكي بالpronouns مثلا لأنه في فترة بلشت تدرج حد اسمك تحط he they أو he she لا مش he she they يعني how كيف هن شو
Their pronouns, right?
For
So
someone who doesn't know مثلا.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, I understand the confusion around this, but it's actually very simple. So the pronouns discourse, the point, I have two things to say about this. The first is
لأنه ما كانوا قبل صح؟
they always have been, like pronouns are always, but the way I think they started to like gender politics started to center these pronouns discourse for a very obvious reason. One, it's because
أنت بلش يصير
ما في إنه a cut off date really. It's more
أو gender to be in شو بيقولوا بطل just بس researchers عم يحكوا صار إنه in our culture gender as a topic as a
I think
concept.
I can't recall a certain date and point,
but it's new, صح?
It's not really new. Like it's historically there are conversations a lot about identity, about maybe it wasn't the politics has progressed in terms of how we define it, but it has always been a guiding characteristics historically in the region and around the world. But anyways, about the pronouns, I think the issue here is that pronouns often essentially they give a space, a platform for people who don't necessarily identify with a binary perspective or
binary
identity.
يعني?
No, like it's like black or white. It's more
صبي أو
like,
بنت ما في.
yes. So that's why you have people that go with go for the pronoun of they, because it's more of it does not go into one of these binary categories of she or he or she or So at Awashi, the first thing, the importance of it is that it allows for this option to exist. And when you allow for this option, it's beyond just, hey, these are my pronouns. It's about allowing for policies, allowing for economic understandings and function that cater for alternative pronouns. So the language we use affects what sort of spaces we can belong to, what sort of jobs we take, etc. And often there is a backlash on this, and we can see the consequences of that, where a lot of non-binary people are excluded from many spaces. People who are not necessarily non-binary, so for example, I'm cis, meaning that I identify as a man, etc. But for example, I can include my pronouns, and that's, to me, it's less about visibility. It's more about, it's a form of solidarity. And if people started using pronouns more often, it wouldn't be weird for you that is non-binary to say, hey, this is my pronoun. So it's a sort of a solidarity mechanism.
وهلا مثلا بتلاحظ في كتير مثلا job openings بقريهم مثلا gender expert أو يعني ما كانوا قبل. So شو بيعملوا exactly مثلا إذا في proposal شو شغلتهم؟
Good question.
إنه هول ما كانوا قبل, so it means قبل ما كنا حتى we're including the individuals أو ما كان عم ينعطوا
emphasis. Of course. هلا I think we need to make a difference here بين إنه yes, there are more job postings on this. There is more focus by international organizations, and that's good. And often, unfortunately, a lot of these positions do not really speak to the politics of gender the way I was speaking about it. So often, a gender advisor or a gender protection would be focused more on women empowerment as just the very traditional, which kind of
It's one aspect. But
Exactly,
it's not
and
everything.
it's counterintuitive in a way. So, sorry, counterproductive. So it's good, it's important, but again, it feeds into how we view gender politics. So, I guess what I'm trying to say, and no, it is good, it's a good step, but I think we need to radicalize the politics around it, even within these job contexts. And second, I think my problem with this culture of tokenizing and نستعمل women as tokens or rather than
Numbers.
yes
Tokens, numbers.
it becomes more like a statistical issue, rather than actually facing the systemic issues at play. So and often in a lot of these workplaces, and I know this from obviously not facts or numbers, but more from narratives. A lot of the work environments that promote such jobs بصير في قصص كتير that are sexist and workplaces that are discriminatory. So we still have a lot of a big gap in pay in certain occupations. But بنفس الوقت, a lot of these institutions would have a job for someone that is focused on gender issues. And I think the problem with that is... Exactly, and I think gender became like the tagging of the concept of gender is being diluted by through these efforts, so we're not really advancing the cause. And
دليل progression أو حضارة.
Exactly, and the problem with that, it ends up مثل placing gender minorities or sexual minorities or women هيك in a very vulnerable state, because these positions don't really or these economic processes don't really address the systemic problems that are driving discrimination against these groups. بيصير في مثل backlash, and why are we setting up these positions? What's the point? You see a lot of people who are generally more privileged, so let's say straight men, who would be and why should we have such positions, such jobs given to people just because of their identity? And I think that backlash is because the posting and the jobs is put forth on the basis of best identity rather than framing it around the economy, around politics, around how society is structured, the inequalities that come out of it. So yes, so it is good, but I think في criticism كتير على هذا الموضوع.
لأنه it comes without awareness, just مثل ما قلت token number. So حكينا عن politics و genders. لبنان وين إذا في شيء يعني مثلا بلدان متقدمين صار يعرفوا نحن وين متقدمين مش متقدمين.
I mean, if you look at
في policies دايما بقول شو policies اللي عندكم مثلا relevant to gender عنا.
I wouldn't say so. I think there has been some effort to include, anti-harassment bills that in practice are not being implemented. And again, you might see policies, you might see statements where officials or groups will be.
بس أكتر شيء أنا بلبنان NGOs local international إذا حدا حكى عن الموضوع بس.
But I think the issue here is that بيصير في حديث, بيصير في sometimes even laws, but in practice there is no application.
ليه؟
I think the reason is because again we don't view these decisions or policies from a systemic lens. So if you have a system that is so patriarchal, that does not view women as equal entities or people who can belong in power and can actually produce work and can push for policies that support the whole of society.
Or do not even recognize في شيء غير المن والwomen.
Exactly. So there is no recognition of the political, economic, not economic value in terms of the value of women, but more of the value they can provide in terms of discourse on the economy, on the politics, etc. So it's Lebanon, you have a sectarian system in place that is truly based on how power is distributed based on sect and religion. So this is the main guiding factor and the main guiding principle. And so really it kind of negates and goes against this politics of gender, because in a sense queer people or women, etc., they challenge this sort of system. So for the system to be okay with women being in power or other minorities, kind of is deciding to cancel itself out. So it's sort of because the system is patriarchal, because it's sectarian, because it's based on masculinities, etc. There become بيصير إنه the space very restricted, or بيكون في space but it is very artificial. So it's not real, you know. It's which is dangerous because often activists see these small steps and would be like, okay, there is some progress. Our work here is done. But actually our work hasn't started really because so it's a very hickey. I think that's why it's really important, I guess, to sum up. It's really important to view issues of gender, of identity in lieu or in the framework of the system, of the politics.
How do we do that? إنه يعني لأنه بحس هالجيل أوعى من الجيل اللي قبل، صح؟
أكيد.
In terms of gender at least، مثلا بيي وبيك وأمي وأمك ما في عقية من هيك أشياء. بس كمان لأنه في كتير وعي، كل واحد بترجمها على ذوقه شو يعني الجندر. ناس بياخدوها extreme وناس بياخدوها superficial value.
Exactly.
إنه
I think what we need to do is إنه when we for example
what we need to do and who needs to do it.
Exactly.
In your opinion.
I think I just want to preface and say
والschools if you think they have a role، لأنه برا صار في كتير backlash فينا نقول على الموضوع، لأنه يمكن بعض الناس أخذوها extreme. يمكن.
Okay, so in Lebanon particularly, I think so after the October uprising and when people went to the street, we saw glimmers of hope in the sense that you saw public spaces more accessible by women who were sharing their political opinions, by queer people who were sharing their political opinions, their views on how policy.
Said everyone can mess.
Yes, exactly, and I think that moment is important to sit with and reflect on, because that moment of radical politics allowed these women, these gender minorities, these sexual minorities to actually not just be present there, they were actually made visible, their opinions were being heard. So I guess what I'm trying to say, the WHO is really actually building gendered platforms or activist platforms. So there has been some positive movement on the front of activist groups who were trying to push for more progressive policies. But however, this was cut short because there was a lot of fragmentation in civil society.
وإجا فيلم باربي.
Yes, so and the discourse around it and really هيك diluting what it really. هلا فينا نحكي عن باربي شوي.
أنا بدي أحكي عن باربي لأنه حسيتها نكتة.
هلا فينا نحكي عن باربي شوي. بس I think إنه I think we need to have more progressive, more intersectional activist.
كيف so activists should be leading the way.
Definitely, and I think we need to go beyond token-based activism. So we need to really understand how can we structurally reform the system through issues of gender, etc.
Schools, universities, I think they have a huge role. But
they have a huge role. But I think because they right now a lot of the educational institutions, even what we refer to as the most progressive, although that doesn't really make any sense, they situate themselves far from these issues.
جربوا ما يحكوا عنه.
Yes, and I think that's very risky and that's very dangerous. It is strategic. It is a strategic decision to situate yourself outside these conversations. But it is dangerous because you have students within your institutions that belong to certain minority groups and
they're not represented.
They're not represented, and I think the way we spread knowledge and the way we share knowledge and expertise makes a lot of difference, and there is evidence of that around the world. So but then Heke, on the point you mentioned earlier on, like there's in the US, for example, or other countries, there is a backlash on I think
يصيروا يخافوا اللبنانيين يفكروا انه اوف هيدا هو الجندر education او sexual education هو مخص يعني.
هو ما في شيء اسمه عن جد gender education. I think these people have existed historically. Nothing has changed. What these educational efforts we're trying to do is trying to really lay down like, okay, so you have this when we speak of gender and we speak of sex, as I was saying our episode, these are two different things. gender is more is amassed as a result of political, cultural processes, and you have different sexual minorities that exist within.
But this was not how it was being explained مثلا بكندا وقت فرجوا إنه كانوا مثلا عم يعملوا a play and they were drag queens. Like, do you think they were focusing on the political? It was like this is us. This is.
I 100% agree. I think so. لأنه I think drag is not. It's not just about people.
ما هاي سكر صاروا الناس إنه.
بس drag is
one.
أول شيء kids are like it's about kids being exposed to these issues. Kids are exposed to very obscene scenes and that are not necessarily queer or related to drag. So like in a very heterosexual context, like often in movies and cinemas there is representation of very kind of R-rated scenes that are very sexualizing women, sexualizing men. Sure. And so I think to me, because the argument of sexualized subjects and kids being exposed to that doesn't really stand. Kids are exposed.
لعبوا غيره.
Basically لأنه it's a way to kind of oppress and to kind of further again based on the appearance of someone to try and oppress a certain group. They don't really care about kids. They don't really care about so for example a lot of behind that discourse there was a lot of conversation on so موضوع الدراج
مثلا كذا حدا بكندا قال بنشيل أولادهم من المدرسة.
Yeah, I know. But I think it's interesting to me because often a lot of the conversation is around the woman, and when we are allowing for representation of trans people or drag queens, etc., you are insulting what a woman is. And I think that again we go back to this issue of gender and not sex. And Tennessee, I think a lot of these countries and a lot of these spaces and the policies have historically disfavored women and the way they define a woman. So in terms of policies, in terms of the economic policies, in terms of their integration into society, in terms of women's right to bodily autonomy, how they engage in sex and other issues. But for some reason, all of this is kind of brushed away and فجأة they became proponents of the woman, and often a lot of men were talking about the threat to womanhood, which to me is counterintuitive لأنه in the same breath you are actually oppressing women, the women you're so aggressively defending. So yes, I think but again I think this process is due to like this debate is due to a lack of understanding of.
أنا بحس it's mostly fear of not knowing
exactly
who the other person is and not wanting to know.
Yeah.
يعني if we get to know the other person
100%
ما بنخاف قد ما نحن. وتاني شيء اللي بيفكروا إنه إذا الأولاد شافوا هالشيء يعني رح يصيروا هالشيء.
Exactly, like there are so many cases where they
مثل هذا عم بقول شاف بفيلم مثل ما قلت حدا مثلا هوكر وانعجب بشخصيتها صاروا كل الولاد بيصيروا هوكرز يعني
100%
انه هالقد واحد دغري شخصيته بتتغير.
Exactly. And historically like انه ما في شيء بيقول انه kids will become gay if they saw two gay men مثلا. and it's really not.
So بتحس كمان ما في enough studies ولا في
I think ما في like there is not enough in general.
في gap research
especially in our region in
بالعرب
because there's a lot of censorship. There's a problem there. There is research that is done, but obviously it's censored. Like ما بنحكي عنها. It's like it's a taboo. So it's again it intersects with cultural.
شو في قطع شيء عن لبنان مثلا قريت وحسيت
I've done studies on that. So I've looked at the economic kind of power of so looking at feminist economics and how looking at feminist approaches to fiscal policies, so taxation, budgeting. Also, I've done a study on like what if there is a social cost to discriminating against certain sexual minorities, and looking at So these studies are there. There is data. There is actual intellectual labor that's being devoted into making these issues very clear in an evidence based.
قانون العمل ما بيعترفوا.
Exactly.
They're discriminated based on their identity.
Exactly. So there is work that is being done in this area, but obviously there is a lot of censorship. And
your experience, the work is led by like men, straight or
this kind of work.
بتحس
I think it depends, but I think largely لا. And probably لو it was led by straight men, it would have been very, very vocalized. But yeah, I think it's, you know, في progress. There is some sort of effort in terms of, there is progress. And I think more researchers are trying to explore new methodologies to understand
researchers.
To understand I know I was saying earlier, you know, issues of gender, sexuality are not really separate from political science, from economics. You know, they are really interdisciplinary, so it's good to think along these lines. بدك نحكي عن باربي او
ايه شو صار
شو صار؟
سمع وقتها الباربي ولحق الباربي الرينبو. انا بحب الرينبو والله.
ايه الرينبو مهضوم.
غيروا نظرة الرينبو.
حضرتي باربي انت؟
انا ما حضرت باربي لانه ما لحقت.
اوكي.
بس انا I read about it just تعرف شو هالكوموشن. apparently ما في شيء بدل انه يمكن اللي يطلع القرار مش حاضر وقتها قالوا عم بيقولوا انه مش حاضر حتى بس خاف من الاسم والالوان.
ايه and I think there was
خبرنا عن باربي.
ايه انه اول شيء I've watched it.
اللي ما بيعرفوا فيلم باربي نزل من فترة وقامت القيامة.
Like
لأنه يوحي بالشذوذ أو شيء.
Exactly. I've watched it. There are absolutely no scenes that are related to.
If anything, someone said it's empowering للwomen.
I have some comments on that, but I think there is. The movie was very basic, and there was no really any radical gender politics in it. It was it's a really simple movie.
اسمه باربي ما بحس هيك.
There was no agendas being forced. It was more about like a woman taking ownership over their role in a society, taking power. But I think the way it was done was, and that's something I heard from other women feminists who I learned from a lot. And it was very commercialized. Like صار في شوي like. Conflation between feminism as an important politics and commercializing or making this a very capitalist enterprise.
Pink.
Yes, exactly. So pink washing in a way, and sort of like and it became like a way for businesses to extract profit. Exactly. So
لأنه كمان حضروا أولاد.
Exactly. So 100%. So أولاد ومش أولاد والناس اللي كانوا بدهم يشوفوا إذا الموفي فيه ومش فيه. So أنا بالنسبة لي it's a capitalistic thing. It's less so about the backlash. I think maybe one of the reasons why there was a backlash in Lebanon is because it threatens maybe the masculinity of the ministers and the parliament or certain religious groups.
أنا بحس it was religious more than anything else.
Because I would give the movie the credit and it does talk about women empowerment and independence and autonomy and which are threatening developments to the typical masculine structure of Lebanon. And often we saw religious entities or religious sects kind of vocalizing their opposition to the movie. But then at some point it became very silly, and there was no evidence of the movie pushing for any agenda. And then they had to kind of take a step back and say, "خلاص, we can screen the movie." So and you say, I think it's good what you mentioned, and this should be seen in the context of general backlash against gender and sexual minorities in general. So
حتى movie ما في الواحد يحلم.
So إنه بنفس الفترة there was
it's our decision.
Exactly, it's a personal decision. بنفس الفترة صار في backlash against gay people,
so
all of this I think can be seen within the same framework, and anything that threatens this political sectarian religious structure is going to be seen as a threat. And I think I would say this is one of the biggest challenges for the movement here, and so any sort of activism around it. That's why when we talk about gender, when we talk about sexuality, we need to talk about it from a kind of systemic, structural language, not from visibility. I don't think it's just about visibility. It's not about having a rainbow flag in Beirut, or it's not about having some sort of gender queer visibility. I think it's good to have that, but I think before that we need to actually ensure that there are social, economic, political rights for these groups, that they are acknowledged and recognized in society and the system, which they are not. Even women.
Will they ever be? هلا women صار لهم سنين وإن الwomen representation so مثل ما قلت بالانتخابات كانوا يحطوا women تيقولوا أوف ليك ونحن عنا women بس هي إنه it's a puppet it's trying to at least for the شو بيقولوا الأحزاب independent to a degree ما بعرف if they have their
independent politics in Lebanon كمان and it's good, but there's a lot of problems there in terms of how they view these issues. So
وبتحس إن they should be leading the way ويحكوا عنهم and they don't, they're scared.
يعني مثلا وقت الباكلاش صار على gay people or queer people in general, there was not much.
ما حدا طلع حكى.
There were some statements, but it was not really formal response. But I think that's an issue as well. The way we see, it's all connected. The politics is very connected, and it becomes a livelihood issue.
ورد الناس بيكرهون إذا طلعوا حكوا شيء زيادة وكرهون زيادة. ما فهمت. ما حدا.
It's a very difficult space. It's a very difficult space. So I think we need to.
Do you ever think we're gonna have someone who's like queer or gay? ما بعرف in parliament? That would be.
No.
Ever. لا. Not in my lifetime.
Not in my lifetime. No, I don't think so.
أنا out of مبدأ everyone should be represented. أنا من أول.
Regardless.
I ran for parliament.
I remember.
إنه قصدي من البداية everyone who asked me ليه عم تترشحي I want to be represented. أنا مايا. إنه and if I want to be represented I should also allow others to be represented. إنه that's only fair. Parliament should represent كل
the groups regardless. They have a certain political idea or vision. That's what matters.
And it's not that scary. They are with us. They live with us. They could be your best friend. But when it's serious إنه لا خلاص كله بيخاف. Exactly. Double lives بلبنان.
Exactly.
It could be your brother or sister. So إنه هي قصدي إنه.
No 100%.
إنه queer is not someone سمعت عنه أو حدا it could be دغري حدا your closest kin.
I think you say something super important. A lot of people who aggress against queer people in specific sense عم نحكي عن هذا الموضوع. I think they don't actually know queer people or they don't speak with queer people.
So to them there's of what you don't know. Exactly.
It's like who is this foreign person and why are they invading society?
صح وشو يفرضوا حالهم يفرضون.
Exactly.
They're like equally.
Exactly.
بحق لهم شو بحق لك.
So بصيروا أكتر scapegoats scapegoating يعني using them as a way to shift away the focus from corruption, from failure, from economic failure. في crisis هلا and often in crisis بيصير هذا الشيء. So بيسموه minority stress. بيصيروا political groups or religious groups they leverage or they use the stress and the anxiety that minority groups have and they scapegoat them as an excuse for the failure of the system. So بيصيروا بيستعملوا women or refugees or queer people as scapegoats for political failure. So that's also one of
بيلوموا الغرب كتير.
Yes.
إنه هيدي فكرة مش من أيامنا هاي الغرب.
Exactly. Which is interesting إنه موضوع القيم إنه family values ما إنه if you think about it beyond gender, beyond sexuality, if you look بعد الأزمة whatever like families became divided, many have immigrated because of the crisis, because of corruption, because there were no jobs, because the people went for opportunities abroad. So in a sense, in a literal sense, it's actually people in power who destroyed the family.
Families, not.
So it's less so queer people who are invisible essentially in society. So yeah.
ما بدي أقول حرام بس أقول it's so unfair honestly.
If
you're a human being, all you want is for other human beings. We come in different shapes, sizes, and colors. So
very true.
I'm not gay, but it upsets me. لأنه I believe if I am free to express myself, others should as well. When I think about it, if I had to live a double life, it's very hard. Why should I hide
and
who
most
I
people
am?
do live a double life as a result.
Most of them. I have friends. I know it's not easy. في كتير حتى their parents ما بيعرفوا لأنه they won't accept them إنه تخيل you're and then again the issue is that if الفاميلي ما حتقبلك society and politics والsocial status هولي رح يتقبلوك.
Exactly.
How do we كتير قوي هالسؤال how do we go about this إنه why am I the way I am ما بعرف أنا I traveled a lot. I always say traveling being exposed to different people opens your eyes غير إنه حدا عايش بالبابل تبعه ما شايف شيء وعنده هيدا الكونسبت us against them إنه هني them ونحن.
Yeah.
طب
how do we make this
أو إنه
difference?
someone wants to know more صح إنه sometimes كمان initiative ما حدا لازم يقلك أنت لازم تروح و seek answers و meet people that are different than you.
Yeah, exactly. I think culture and what sort of cultures you get exposed to, what sort of relationships you have, what sort of networks you are in, make a lot of difference. And I think platforms like Chevening, for example, they have like this podcast and other initiatives.
Right.
They have a big role to play in terms of
influencers. They have such no one's talking about it.
Exactly. So having these platforms where because there is not much culture of yalla, let me go and ask and learn, because again there is this fear of knowing. Having a kind of a soft conversation that is not aggressive, not defensive, like this one, is one step forward. I think
awareness.
100%. And as you said earlier, educational institutions and other يعني.
وأنا كنت دايما فكر إنه all people that are religious بيقولوا إنه it's against our values. There's a quote by Jesus بيقول إنه treat others the way you want to be treated. It's also called golden rule بالحياة. So if we just apply that one, which I always apply to my own life, إنه treat others the way you want to be treated. It's no brainer إنه. Definitely they have the right to be who they are, and we should accept them if we want to be accepted for who we are. So to me it's so easy, but بالحياة it's so hard.
Yeah, because it's very complex and political, as I mentioned. So, but yeah, for sure. But yeah, Chevening is one way to.
Chevening is one way. وحتى كنت عم بحكي هديك النهار إذا Chevening they should also focus مثلا in their selection criteria to focus on the marginalized.
أكيد. Yeah.
يعني make sure someone that مثلا is not represented in society يكون represented بالscholarship at least.
So I think they have been trying to make that effort, but they haven't been ما في concrete steps. But I've been reading. I know that that's a priority for them, but I think it should be more concrete. Yeah, for sure.
I think ما بعرف.
I think we've covered
we covered a lot. جماعة في كتير أشياء بعد كتير more complicated, more scholastic وهيك. بس نحنا
wanted to make it هيك accessible conversation.
إيه قلنا بداية ما بعرف إذا في follow up إذا حسين بده we can definitely do
why not?
an episode too. والله really. جماعة in the back لينا زينة عندكم شي سؤال؟ نحب الجمهور نتفاعل مع الجمهور. معنا هيدا يعني دليل نحن غطينا كتير أشياء أو لا بلا we did. Thank you لكل مين تابعنا. This was episode 3. Thank you حسين. Episode 4 is on the way. Topic حقلكم surprise, but it should be around health. It should be led by one of our Chevening scholars, Lina Fakih. And then there's Lina Kamen, who's going to do also an episode about health. So health is something a lot of Cheveners are interested in. As I always end هيدا done أو cut أو ما بعرف كل مرة بخترع شيء. This is how we end our episode. ومن كلا. Thank you, Rolo.